I think the biggest difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is Republicans are more ambiguous in supporting Ukraine and more direct in supporting Taiwan, but the Democrats are more direct in supporting Ukraine and more ambiguous in supporting Taiwan. I think if we can combine those policies and become more direct in supporting both Ukraine and Taiwan, then the U.S. would probably keep its leadership as the world #1 democracy and as a uniting force of all the democratic countries. This is Stan from Freedom is Not Free channel. Today let's discuss some of the current events that are related both to the US politics and with some implications to Taiwan. Probably everybody knows that Joe Biden is not running for president anymore, and right now there is a very high chance that Kamala Harris, the current vice president of the United States, would run as a presidential candidate for the Democrats. Everyone might be asking what the foreign policies of Kamala Harris might be. And that's why today I prepared this video so that we can discuss what changes might there be, if there would be any changes, if Kamala Harris becomes the president, because she is the VP in the current administration, and what are the implications to Taiwan if the president is the Democrat and if the president is Kamala Harris, and not, for example, Donald Trump. I've actually made another video on what is the current Republican stance on Taiwan and what would be the conservative policies targeting this island nation if Donald Trump becomes president. But today let's focus on the Democrats and how their foreign policy looks like. Well, first of all, strong stance against China and Russia is a bipartisan consensus right now, in my opinion. And Kamala Harris emphasized herself that she will maintain the current policies targeting Russia and China. What she also said, it is important for American leaders to be leading and not following on global issues. And then here probably would see more united effort to help Ukraine, to support Ukraine, and trying to communicate with different allies in Indo-Pacific region, starting with India, the Philippines, Japan, Korea, to protect Taiwan in case there is an invasion from China. She has also been very vocal on human rights issues in China, particularly in Hong Kong and in the Uyghur region in Xinjiang. And if you guys remember the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, it was co-sponsored by Kamala Harris and Marco Rubio. So it's a bipartisan initiative to actually target the human rights violations in China, how the Chinese Communist Party is committing Uyghur genocide right now in China, building concentration camps, murdering people, using forced labor. Talking about Taiwan, Kamala Harris probably would maintain Joe Biden's stance on Taiwan, meaning strategic ambiguity, but at the same time providing Taiwan with the necessary weaponry to protect itself. In September 2022, she also reaffirmed the US's commitment to provide for Taiwan's self-defense. For Taiwan, which is also very important, Kamala Harris met with President Lai when he was running for president and made a visit to South America. She has also condemned Chinese aggression against the Philippines and constant harassment of the Philippines. So probably she would maintain a moderately tough stance on China and China's expansionism. What might be different from the Republican stance is the policies that are targeting North Korea, because Harris criticized Trump not addressing effectively North Korea's nuclear threat, even though that Trump's administration led to some de-escalation efforts, but just strategies are a little bit different between the Republican Party and the Democrats. Then there is India, and it's pretty interesting because Kamala Harris has been changing her stance on India. She was criticizing Narendra Modi, and she was criticizing Indian government policies when she was a senator. But later on, when she became vice president, her stance became much less harsh. And in 2023, Prime Minister Narendra Modi actually praised Kamala Harris. So probably relationships with India would maintain its good stance. But I also think if Trump becomes president, there won't be any changes in friendship between India and the United States, as both countries are facing one common threat, which is Chinese expansionism. Probably we will also see more support to Ukraine and more cooperation with the European countries while targeting Russia's expansionism, as Kamala Harris has also been very supportive of Ukraine. And before Russia's invasion in Ukraine, Kamala Harris has been showing support of Ukraine, deepening cooperation with NATO, which is good. I think the biggest difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is Republicans are more ambiguous in supporting Ukraine and more direct in supporting Taiwan, but the Democrats are more direct in supporting Ukraine and more ambiguous in supporting Taiwan. I think if we can combine those policies and become more direct in supporting both Ukraine and Taiwan, then the US would probably keep its leadership as the world #1 democracy and as a uniting force of all the democratic countries. Talking about the Middle East, Kamala Harris surprisingly supported Abraham Accords that were put forward by Trump's administration. But on the other hand, she also supported applying more pressure to Israel in Gaza conflict. But I think the weakest point of Kamala Harris's foreign policy would be how she sees Iran. Because I think if she becomes president, the US's stance against Iran would be much softer. And Iran is not a force that can be tolerated, and everything should be done to prevent them from developing their nuclear weapons and threatening the US allies in the Middle East. Iran is the key competitor and probably the main enemy of the United States in the region. Why do I think her stance against Iran would be weak? Because first of all, she opposed a military strike against Soleimani in year 2020, and she also supported the legislation that would block military actions against Iran. In my opinion, this is wrong. The US should understand who the main competitor in the Middle East is. And main threats that the US allies and the US itself are forcing comes from Iran and Iranian money. Hamas is basically being sponsored by Iran. So just to conclude today's video, I think Kamala Harris's foreign policy would be an extension of Biden's foreign policy with maybe some minor changes in addressing, for example, Iran or conflict between Israel and Hamas. In terms of Taiwan relations, I think the US would maintain its strategic ambiguity if Kamala Harris is the president, maintain an informal cooperation between Taiwan, but in my opinion, the Republicans would be more straightforward in supporting Taiwan, as we see people like J.D. Vance who understands how dangerous is China and that China is an existential threat to the United States. I would like to add to that not only to the United States, but also to all the democratic countries. But for Taiwan, I think there is still nothing to worry about, because both the Republicans and Democrats are supportive of Taiwan's defense, and we would see either a movement to more direct relations under Republicans, or still maintaining ambiguous relations under the Democrats, but with more military support. So for Taiwanese Americans or for the Taiwanese people, I think both of the parties are in support of Taiwan and Taiwan's defense. In terms of US-Europe relations, I think there would be less pressure on the European countries applied by the United States to expand on our military spending, which I don't agree with. I think that we should spend more, and if the US doesn't apply pressure, we should still do it by ourselves, because we still are facing very dangerous countries like Russia or Iran next to us, and we also have to support Ukraine and let Ukraine win this war. So what I totally agree with Kamala Harris is on her support of Ukraine, but I also think that the United States also should apply more pressure to countries like Germany and France to invest more in military and provide more to Ukraine. And I also have a hope, or probably a suggestion, to start sending signals to China that the US won't tolerate their expansionism and how they are threatening and targeting the US allies, both in South China Sea or in Taiwan, or countries like Japan and South Korea. Because when we're united, we're much stronger, in my opinion. So what do you guys think about Kamala Harris becoming the possible president, and what do you think about her foreign policy stance? Please leave a comment. And even though I think she has some failures in her position as vice president, for example, with the border issues, with the border crisis in the United States, I still think with the right people around her, she might be a moderately strong president in terms of foreign policy, but we will see. For Europe and Taiwan, both of the candidates have some advantages and some disadvantages, so let's keep on watching. It's going to be a very interesting race. So thank you for watching, and remember, freedom is not free.